Monique, you're really touching something in my psyche here. In my time as a teacher, I'm one of those people who, I think I was a pretty good teacher, right? And I have some good reviews. They said I was a good teacher. However, I couldn't keep doing it because of the emotional toll that it required,
Yeah.
particularly because of the underprivileged communities that I served. It takes a huge emotional toll and commitment to explore these things. And as I hear you talking, I'm thinking about the young black girls that I interacted with as their teacher and
Hmm.
how I had to consciously make the decision, am I going to respond viscerally, or am I going to ask myself the question of why are they feeling and acting out this way?
Hmm.
And I can't say that I made it 100% of the time, but there's two cases in my mind that come to mind that I actually was able to help move them to a different place because I asked a simple question of why are they reacting like this, and it brings it to even now that I left the school world and went to corporate America. One of the things that they instilled in us was you never know what that person's day was like as a consultant. And so, as a
Hmm.
consultant, it isn't our job to respond to how they're behaving on that phone call. As a consultant, it is to identify with them, explore their human condition, and then bring them on board. And we put all this emphasis for this type of treatment in corporate America. And
Hmm.
I don't know how many people are actually doing this in the classroom. In your exploration and talking with students, do you have any examples? And I know you mentioned some in your book, but how do we
Hmm.
get people to take that extra step, particularly with black girls, and consider their starting position and treat them first as a whole person versus responding viscerally to what we may perceive to be an attitude?
Yeah, no, I love that comparison because there are many ways in which our treatment of young people in classrooms is inconsistent with our expectations of them upon their graduation, right? And so, one of the things that I say, is when I was teaching in grad school, we would start each day with basically what is essentially a mindfulness exercise where I would check in with each of my grad students. And
Mm.
I said, we shouldn't have to wait until grad school to be able to ask someone how they're doing and what do they need in order to
Wow.
learn, right? Like we shouldn't have to wait that long to teach in a way that is empathic. And so, one of the things that I think is really critical for us, both as educators, but also just as a greater community of concerned adults and caring adults, is to understand that the fear of violence in many ways is greater than the actual demonstration of it
Mm.
in our schools. And that our policies have been constructed to respond to the worst possible scenario, which then criminalizes minor behaviors of
Right.
children who are just learning how to be young adults,
Wow.
right? And they're going to make mistakes. Now, we have engaged in new rhetoric, new language now that talks about being trauma informed. And everyone talks about trauma informed practices, trauma informed services. And really, what I think is critical here is understanding that at the center of engaging in any trauma or healing informed practice is asking the question that you just asked, which is what is happening?
Mm.
What happened?
Yeah.
Not what's wrong with you. What did you do? It's what happened. Talk to me about what is going on. And new research out of Stanford is showing that when educators do approach a disciplinary situation with that in mind, what they call it empathic, responses to
Yeah.
problematic student behavior, that's when you start to see a reduction in suspensions. I think they found that the reduction in student suspensions for those classrooms and schools that engaged in empathic discipline, the reduction for Black and Latina girls was by 75%. I
Wow.
mean, it's outstanding.
Yes.
And really, it's consistent with everything the girls are saying in this book, which is, I need someone to care for me. I need someone to ask me how I am doing. I need someone to see that I may talk back to you, but it's because I'm dealing with constant sexual harassment. I'm frustrated. I'm looking at these situations and I don't see myself anywhere represented in the course material. I feel irrelevant. There is an erasure of my experience. There's a way in which when I challenge you on my erasure that you consider me defiant
Mm.
and tell me to home, and so there are lots of ways in which, we're all responsible for constructing this problematic condition. But I also feel like there's ways in which, because we're all responsible, we can all respond in ways to fix it, right?
Mm.
And so when we think about what needs to be in place, number one, the thing that I think community can do is to stop turning a blind eye to the sexual and physical victimization of Black girls.
Wow.
And the centrality of trauma related to the girls who are most at risk of contact with the juvenile legal system and school pushout is very great. Meaning, I'll put that in other ways, which is the girls who are most in trouble with the law and the girls who are most at risk of being pushed out of school are girls who have experienced some form of sexual, physical, or emotional abuse. If we begin to, as a community, stop pretending that this doesn't exist in our communities, then we will begin to address the priming. I call it in the book, the priming of Black girls for their own victimization. We'll address those kinds of things, right? The ways in which our girls are singing songs from the moment they play patty cake that prepare them for a life of victimization and rape.
Wow.
Right? These are deeply problematic, deeply problematic. And it's something that we don't have very rigorous conversations about that we need to. And so when we address that as a community, we present girls who are then ready to learn to schools, right? Wow. And we can also engage in conversations with educators about how they construct classroom climates that are inclusive of our girls, that are healing informed when they are responding to problematic student behavior, that have restorative and healing opportunities in schools, that engage our girls as leaders, that engage our girls as learners, as scholars, as participants in their full experience in school, and not relegating them to just being on the basketball team, right? Or just saying, okay, well, she's quiet, so she's fine. Sometimes silence doesn't equal being fine. Sometimes silence is also an expression of feeling and the erasure that we've been talking about this entire program. So there are ways in which, we can construct new classroom climates that are also about college and career readiness, that are responsive to the implicit biases that all of us hold and all of us, are engaging when we make decisions about girls or when we see girls in our communities. But ultimately, there's got to be this way in which we unapologetically say that we are not going to throw away any of our kids. And we cannot engage in rhetoric or in practices that prioritize oppressions. That is not useful.